Okay, the webinar is live and we can start with that first meeting, Mr. Tomasic.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I'd call to order the special meeting of council for the Borough of Forest Hills, February 9th, 2021. Pledge of Allegiance, I will lead it since I don't see Mr. Porco here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Burley,
Here.
Ms. DeMarco,
Here.
Mr. Erbaldinger,
Here.
Mr. Gorel,
Here.
Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Thielacker. I see Tom here. You're muted, Mr. Thielacker. Mayor Porco, Mr. Corbel.
Here.
And the manager is here too. So just Mayor Porco and Mr. Lawrence are not present yet.
All righty. Public comment, agenda and non-agenda items. All persons wishing to address items based on the explanation below will be heard at this time. Use raise hand icon on bottom of Zoom screen to request to speak following announcement of the start of the public comment period. This period focuses on both agenda and non-agenda items. At this time, citizens may address council on any issue appearing on today's agenda or any other issue you may wish to bring forward before council. Only residents and taxpayers of the Borough of Forest Hills will be permitted to address council. This is the only public comment period for this meeting. Speakers will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Groups of people will be required to designate a spokesperson to represent them before council, who may speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. Please spell out the name for the record. Speakers are reminded that council uses these comment periods as opportunities to gather information and not to respond directly to concerns raised. Information gathered will not be discussed at the business meeting, but instead will be referred by the council president to the appropriate committee for review and discussion at the next committee meeting. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to address council at this time?
January 6th to become our future. And what will that mean for America? Think about it. What will the January exception mean to future generations if you grant it?
Somebody else here.
Somebody has something in the background on?
It's Mr. Erbaldinger. Sorry, I thought I was on mute.
Okay. All right. So we have, I thought that was, I don't know, didn't know who that person was. They didn't spell it.
Somebody hacked into our system.
Please note Mr. Lawrence is here now.
Okay, please note Mr. Lawrence is now is present for the meeting. Okay, so therefore, we're going to move to the Committee of Borough Property with Mr. Thielacker. Mr. Thielacker, please. You have a motion on the agenda. Do you have it with you?
I'm sorry. To tell you the truth, I didn't realize it was my motion to make. That's all.
That's okay.
All right. I move to approve Resolution 1219, authorizing the manager and engineer to apply for a CITF grant for funding for pool work and pool items.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any question or comments concerning this issue? None being raised. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Burley,
Yes.
Ms. DeMarco,
Yes.
Mr. Erbaldinger,
Yes.
Mr. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes.
Mr. Thielacker,
Yes.
President Tomasic.
Yes, motion passes. This concludes our special business meeting. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, I just need a few seconds to
Mr.
switch over
Morris,
to
go
planning
right
and
into the
zoning.
committees.
Just a couple of seconds and I'll get to planning and zoning first. Okay, Mr. Burley, I'm fine. If you're
Yes.
okay to start.
Yes, that's fine. Mhm.
All I have on there is some reminders and just another reminder in case you didn't read my email today. Mr. Silversmith is supposed to be on the committee of the whole meeting at approximately 8 o'clock as an attendee. So you'll be able to hear from him at that time, but I don't have anything to report other than that.
All right, thank you. Okay, Don, you're on.
Okay, yeah, I don't have any new important issues pertaining to code enforcement to report tonight. As far as the tree and shrub committee, Crestwood Tree Services started pruning about 2 weeks ago. And when they're finished with the pruning, they will start the removals. So that's basically all I have to report tonight.
Oh, thank you, Don.
Anybody
Okay,
have, they want to discuss with me?
I had a question.
yes, Patty. Mhm.
I understand we have about 30 trees that are being removed. Is that correct?
It's pretty close to it. That includes all the bad trees down behind the EMS building and the fire department also.
Okay, tree
But as
pits.
far as residential trees, it's probably only about maybe half that.
Okay, the reason I ask is that Tree Pittsburgh has made available about 1,000 trees for people to claim for planting in the spring. And I wanted to know if you think it would be a good idea if we claim for, like, say 20 trees.
That would be great.
Okay, I'll put in inquiry and see what we need to do to get on their list.
Are those the trees that you emailed us? The butternut and the,
Yes.
I forget the
Well,
two.
that was the ones they recommended for replacement in the park. But that same organization has a tree planting program throughout the greater Pittsburgh area. And they have 1,000 trees that they're making available for plantings. So I'm going to ask them for 2 dozen for us to just replace trees that need to be removed. We may
Okay,
or may
keep
not
in
get it,
mind-
okay? We may or may not get it, but I'll put in the inquiry.
I understand. Keep in mind, we also have probably 15, maybe even 20 of those trees that we took out of the area where the new building is built. So
Yeah,
we
they're
have
not
those
real-
stored
they're
in.
not real hefty trees, because I got one of them in my yard and it has fungus on it, and I've been babying it for 2 years. I think it's going to make it, but they're not real hefty trees.
Good.
They're not in real good shape. So
Okay. It'll be fine.
I'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
Okay, Patty, did you have something to say to us regarding Wilkinsburg comp plan?
No,
I think it was something that came up.
this is their standard inquiry of people in the neighborhood, like we did issued when we did ours. They're only redating the one that they did before. They're not rewriting it. So there's no reason for us to revisit that. We can just send them a letter that we have no objections. They're not doing anything new that we haven't already acted on in the past, as far as I can tell.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. Mr. Tomasic is going to say something to us about the barrow trees.
Okay, I would like to quickly talk about the invoice associated with some work we did at 200 Cascade, I believe. Mr. Branzel was associated with putting this all together. The total amount for the job was $2,836.84. That was done to basically save a burrow tree. It involved the removal of concrete on the driveway of the resident, supplies, new concrete installation. Carl Tree Service came in and removed the roots. We got gravel, mesh, concrete, etc. This was all done associated with going into the property of the individual. So when we deal with barrow trees, we often get into this kind of stuff because if we want to save the tree, we have to be willing to spend the money. And the individual property owner doesn't have the right to take the tree out by themselves. As Dawn can attest to, I believe in the past, we have had people who have taken trees out on their own without permission, and as borough property, they were required to reimburse us for that damage or removal of the trees. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that that's a common process that we go through. and that when we have any kind of situation involving borough property, we seek to get restitution for it. We're in that process right now that Mr. Corbel will be talking about later on in the meeting, in which we had removal of borough property from down on behind the Roman Bistro by Mike Roman, who took it out without a permit and then dumped it on Mr. Gorel's property. However it got there, I don't know. So thank you, Mr. Burley. Appreciate it.
You're certainly welcome. Are there any other planning and zoning items?
Yes, Bill, I had a
Yes.
question for Patty. Patty, did we talk to Steve about what trees we wanted planted back at the main park?
Yes, I did send a memorandum to that effect. I conferred with Tree Pittsburgh and sought their advice from their studies of the tree canopy throughout Pittsburgh, and asked for recommendations for things that would thrive in that area. And I gave that to Mr. Morris, and I believe it was shared with the Public Works people.
Yeah, and we
Perfect.
got it. We got an answer back from PennDOT, which I forwarded to you, Patty, to make sure you were okay with it. That
Yep.
was a while ago, though. I hope
Yeah, it was.
you did see that.
And I signed off on it, and they signed off on it. So that's
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was something I just remembered.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Billy. Okay, if there's nothing else, then we're done.
Okay, a few seconds and I'll move to finance. Okay, I'm fine with starting finance, Mr. Marco, if you're okay.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mainly what's on here is a manager's update. There's two items, my update and then the bond issue question. I have about 6 or 7 things to go through that should be fairly brief. First, cash flow. I've not had the time to do anything, and I'll explain that more when I talk about the budget because I'm very far behind. But I did take a look at the bookkeeping system to see where we stood with revenues and expenses at the end of the year. And again, this is prior to normal adjustments. Wendy has may or may not have finished closing out 2020. I believe she did, but I don't know if I have all the numbers in the AccuFund system correct yet or not. And as you know, she's out of the office right now. But we were ahead going into the old year. From the old year 2020 to the new year by about 570,000. As far as January is concerned, we had revenues of about 182,000 and expenditures of 394. And this again is typical this time of year, pre-tax collection season. This is one reason why a lot of people take out tax anticipation notes, but we have enough money that we can borrow from ourselves, so we don't do that. So in any case, we're pretty similar to where we've been the last few years, and I will get you a better look at that probably in March, I hope, when I'll do the first 2 months of 2021. And then the full 2020 will be in the budget book, which I'll talk about in a few minutes as far as the delay there. But the full 2020 will be there. Again, I just want to make sure, in case anybody's listening to us, that cash flow is just a picture of a point in time. Doesn't mean we actually have that much money right now. It means at that point that I took this picture, if you want to call it that, that's how much money was there. But money's constantly going in and out, obviously, as we pay bills and get revenues, et cetera. So it's just a picture of a point in time. But it is positive to show that we were ahead at the end of last year. Again, we've usually been ahead. There's been only a year or two here or there we've had a negative number, and it hasn't been substantial, and that was a while ago. So everything looks pretty good with cash flow, but I'll get you more specifics on that. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, item B, the audit agreement. Case Sabatini has verbally told us that they would like to continue to do the audit at the same cost that we have been charged for the last 9 years. And that's pretty good. Oh, that's why a lot more communities are going with Case, because they do a good job. The lead auditor is actually a member of the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association Review Board. So they're very quality people there, but we haven't gotten the written proposal yet. And I usually like to have council approve that. Of course, with the pandemic, everything is slowed down with them too. But he did verbally talk with our treasurer and indicate that we're going to get an agreement, a proposal with the exact same cost. So usually by now they would have started too, but again, with the pandemic, it's slow. They're looking for places they can safely go to the various municipalities where they, serve. We have some places we can put them in here if we need to isolate them. So we just have to coordinate that. So it's going to be a little bit slow, but I just want to let you know that's outstanding. Anybody have any? As soon as I get the proposal from them, I will put that on the agenda, by the way. So if it comes before the 24th, I'll have it on there for approval. Does anybody have any questions about that?
There's nothing we need to do. We shouldn't call them or ask them. Should I call them? Or
I'm
you
sorry?
You don't think we need to call them or anything to find out?
Oh, we've been doing that, believe me. Yeah, I mean, so yeah. We call, email, and we've talked to them. It's just a question of getting the paperwork.
Okay.
All right, item C.
If memory serves me right, Mr. Morris, I think they've been with us for about 11 or 12 years.
Maybe it's been longer than that. You're right. The cost, I think, went up once by $1,000. It's basically been pretty much the same every year. Now, if we have them do something special, and there are times when we have to, like if you get certain grants, you have to have that audited. If we hire them, there's an additional cost for that, but we'd have to pay an auditor regardless. Probably with the CITF grants, for example, we'll have to do that again. The budget book, I am just swamped and overwhelmed, and the printing is delayed, and I'm sorry, but there's only so much I can do. And again, I just want to emphasize, because everything is on my computer, I can't really give it to somebody else to do. And because 2020 took a little bit of time to close out, it took me a little while to be able to get all those numbers in at the end. And as you know, I show statistics every year in my budget book. There's pages and pages of stats. I always use the final numbers for the previous year so that you're as accurate and as up to date as possible. And I'm sorry, I've worked from home, and that's actually helped, because at home I don't get disturbed. Here I do. And you can take that a couple of different ways if you want, about me being disturbed. But in any case, that's part of the problem. There have been a number of different things. I don't want to blame it on anything, but there's just been a number of different things that surprised me that I've had to do. For example, the CITF grant came up at the last minute, and so that takes me away from things, and I have to spend an hour or two online or on Zoom or on a phone with somebody about that. And we've already been talking with the county about that a few times. So I apologize. The numbers on the borough website are accurate. That's still the preliminary budget. Excuse me. But as you remember, we did not change the preliminary budget at all when we passed the final. So I will first get stuff on the website so that everybody can see that. And then I'll get the books printed. And part of the problem also is, formatting. I'm doing everything in one book now. It takes a while to format. When they switch Word from one version to another, as I now have a new version of Word, so I'm sorry, just the way it is. I will hopefully get this book to you soon. As I say here, doing the best I can. Item D, Wilmerding Community Center sent a letter to the mayor, and he asked me to mention it here during finance to see if anybody wanted to approve a donation that they're asking for of $250 or more to help support their community center. And you can read that on the notes I gave you. He was not requesting that you do it. He just wanted to know if you wanted to. So
I don't think it fits our policy.
That's fine. I'm just asking. Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's an overwhelming support for it, so I'll mention that as a no to them, or to mayor. Tax collector exoneration. Ms. Sullivan submitted a letter which is attached to your notes. requesting a formal motion to exonerate her from the uncollected balance for 2020. You can read her letter. It's attached. This is typical at this time of year. And usually in February, you pass the motion to exonerate. So take a look at her letter. And on the 24th, I will put a motion on there to do that unless there's any objection. Of course, you can always raise an objection that day as well. Any questions or problems with that?
Question. Those delinquent amounts will be sent to the tax collection agency, is that correct?
Andrews and Price.
Yeah, okay.
Anybody else?
I
Okay.
mean, we do it every year. I'm good.
Yeah, right, exactly. Ameriserve has asked if they could come to the March Finance Committee meeting for one of their 2 or semi-annual updates on the pension plans. I
Yes.
told them I'd check to see if that was okay with the committee. No
Yes, I would like
objections?
to hear from them. I would like to hear from them.
Okay, so I will mention that. And then the only other thing I have is just those reminders under outstanding items. There's nothing pressing right now. In March, the second bullet point about authorizing the borough manager to extend payment deadlines may be something you're going to want to consider. I don't know what the economy or the pandemic will be like in the next few weeks. We'll see, I guess. But in any case, that'll be up to you. But I'll mention that in March again to remind you that you've only extended the deadline. I shouldn't say deadlines. The freedom for people to not pay a penalty through the end of March. So I'll bring that up again at the March meeting. Other than that, everything else that's on here, the trash contract and shelf font stuff, that's all stuff that it does not have to happen right now. Mr. Corbel, when would you suggest the trash contract? You should start looking at that.
Honestly, we should start looking at it now. There's no reason to delay.
I think there is a regional compact coming together out of Connect. And I would like to have a look at that so we can feed that into our negotiations. There are, a number of communities that are looking at negotiating similar terms across the region so that we have less confusion from town to town in our contracts with the garbage haulers.
Well, what are we talking about, Patty? Like,
They're providing a model contract so that everybody can work from the same model contract to negotiate similar terms for recycling conditions across the region, rather than have, 5 or 6 different versions of one takes glass and one doesn't take glass and one takes, trying to get a more homogenized recycling and reclamation market so that we have a way to amplify what can be reclaimed.
well, I mean, that's up to the group, I suppose, if you want to wait for that. I mean, it makes,
Well, we don't have to wait long.
That's-
I think it's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So I will try to get a hold of it as soon as I can.
yeah, I think I remember someone from Connect asking, or I shared our contract with
Yeah.
somebody.
They
I
collected
feel
all,
like it was so long ago, I was actually in my office when it
no,
happened.
they
So,
collected all the contracts from all the 35 towns. And they've done an analysis of similarities and pulling common features together so that we have moving toward a more circular kind of an economy where we can capture things that are normally thrown away.
so, I mean, I think that's part of the process of trying to gather your thoughts about what you're looking for in the contract. I would suggest pulling it out, taking a look if there's anything that's working or not working. So we could start that thought process, and then if everybody agrees, we can integrate some of the practices that Connect may recommend.
Okay.
But think about things like, is the recycling schedule working for you? Do you want it, curbside with bigger bins, or more frequently or less frequently? We've talked about this in the past to try to save money for folks in Forest Hills. So I would just think about those bigger picture issues as we get ready to put a new document together. Bill, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think we should just start moving forward with this, contact them. Jack has been involved with this quite a bit in terms of dealing with them, especially about the glass issue. So I think we need to start the process, and then when we get this additional information, we can start working on that as well. There's nothing to preclude us from adding information as we proceed through this process.
Yeah, that's true. 100%.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, I will keep this on the agenda under this category anyway for next meeting. This will all stay on there regardless. So I don't have anything else to report. Under item 2, I just want to mention for bond issue items, you wanted to begin considering them. I did give you a copy of the comprehensive plan budget attached to your notes. And if anybody doesn't have it, you want me to put it on a screen, I can do that, because that's probably where you should start from if you're looking at what to put in the bond issue spending. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
I do want to go through all of these items. I'm not sure that tonight is the right time to do that.
Well, if you want it, I can put it on you can have this to look at since I haven't printed them out yet for you. This does have the year-to-date December 31st, 2020 final numbers on there.
So the
So,
number one that we handed out, is that the actuals? Are those the ones that are in 2020, those have been expended, or are those?
Yeah, everything in
those
that second column is
Okay.
actual spending for capital.
The third
for
column, is
2020.
what we have to decide what we're going to do for this year.
Well, this year, the next few years, I mean, you have to spend 85% within the first 3 years. So we're about a half to 8 months into the first year. But I mean, it's no problem spending money, believe me. So just the main thing is what you want to associate with that. The best place to start is with the capital plan, since you spend a lot of time on that. You can always add items if you want, but it makes sense to start with the capital plan.
Okay.
So you want me to, I'll include this on the agenda for next month?
Yeah, and I think we should look at it in some detail. I know, will the paying of the solar panels fall within that window? I think that's one of the biggest
Doing
items.
what?
Well,
Say it again?
the final payment on the solar panels is 375 in 2024. That's in that 5-year window, right?
Well, you're talking about 3 years to spend 85%. 3 years from the time you got the money, which would have been last year.
Okay, so then
So 2023 would be,
the last. that
well, sometime in 2023 is
Okay,
when you should have 85% of it spent.
yeah, so
I mean,
the solar would be beyond that.
If you look at Wendy's numbers every month, she gives you a total of what's in every account. And there is that special account for solar panels that
Right.
we're putting money aside. We've been doing that for a while now. Again, that was just her idea and my idea, more mine. I don't want to blame her. But you can always take it out if you don't agree with it. But we thought this made sense to put the money aside just in case. And that way it's there. And if you need it for something else, it's there too. So I'll include this on the agenda then for next month, so that you can take a look at it. If you want to, I'd be happy to recommend things to you, but I don't want to be the one to say, oh yes, spend the money. Well, actually I do want to be the one, but I'm not elected. So it's a little bit different. I want to be the one to spend money all the time.
Well, I've been going through this. I have trouble seeing it in this light and this little tiny print. I have to put it on my screen and make it bigger, which is why I can't really talk about it right now. I had a question. The police cameras, public safety, there's another 15, is that 15 or 50?
I'm putting it up on screen now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So
All right.
what were you looking at?
All right, go down. Okay. Body armor vests. Is this the second half of something, or is this a repeating?
It's a repeat. It wasn't spent yet.
Okay, we didn't spend that.
No.
We didn't spend the first.
If you did, it would have been showing up right in this column here.
All right.
So
So that,
Chuck asked for it to stay in the
okay,
new.
still there. Okay.
I don't think that'd be something that would be typical of a bond issue though, because I don't believe they have that long a life, do they?
No, they don't. The canine dog and training, it's not in until the next year, but that's a big number. That's $25,000. And as far as I know, the canine officer is not on duty at this time. Is that correct?
Right.
So I would like to delete a capital item for the dog training and kenneling.
Well, this is already, I mean, you can delete anytime you want. It's not I mean, this is for 20, you have to look at this as just a plan for 5 years. It doesn't mean that you're committed to it. So when you're saying deleting something, I'm not going to go back and forth and change
Can I say something?
every time. Go ahead.
We don't even know what's going on with Officer Armstrong, so I think we should wait with doing anything. Maybe we have to train a new officer and it will be expensive. So I think we should keep it. It's 23, I think it was. So we should just wait until we have all the facts, what's going on with our canine dog.
Yeah, that's in 2022. Okay, not 2021. So
And
everything
I couldn't see the top of your thing.
Yeah, I'm
but
sorry.
It's okay, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
But it's still it's not this year, so I think we can wait until we have to decide about that.
Okay. All right.
The main thing, go ahead.
We have to look at things that are on this list that have a 5-year life or longer.
No, no, for bond issue, longer, unless you can always do something shorter if you want, but realize the bond issue won't get paid off till 2035. So if you spend money on something now that's going to be destroyed or gone in 2 years, essentially you're carrying that debt for another 12 years or whatever it is. Even though you've exhausted it, it's gone. That's why usually you wouldn't put a police car in a bond issue. You might put a borough truck though in a bond issue. So if it would help for next month, I could highlight things that would have a long life.
That would
put that on this and then reattach this to your agenda.
So you have building roof for the volunteer fire department, that would definitely qualify in that context. And don't know.
Well, that's looking at that, there's something. Didn't we just finished the roof over there
That's what I
on that side?
Here.
So, but again, this was something that had been planned for 2021, and that happened between the time we were approving things and the time that that was done. So that's why it's still there, but it's been done. The 2-story side roof, right, Tom? Is Tom there?
That was completed. It's done.
What was the roof on the 2-story sides finished, correct?
Yes, it is complete.
Yeah. So that 50,000 was there for 2021 because we weren't sure we were going to get the job done in 2020. But between the time everything got approved and the time that was done over there, it just didn't get changed on this sheet. But that just means you've already spent it. You don't have to worry about it. It's,
Okay, well, I would like to have a look at these things in terms of their longevity, and we can look at that in more detail in a couple weeks.
Okay, so I'm going to put a note to highlight long-lived assets.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll do that next month.
Okay.
And include that for you to look at.
All right, and we can have a discussion in the finance committee meeting of March in detail about that.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Are there any other finance matters that anyone would like to bring up this time?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think that's the end of our agenda.
Okay, I can move to bond issue. I can move to committee of the whole in a couple of seconds. Just give me a little bit of time here.
Just for your information, while we're waiting, I did file the paperwork for a LGA intern to work with us on a communications plan. I don't know if we'll get it or not, but we did manage to get it filed timely. So I thank Angelo and Jack for input on that process and Mr. Morris over the weekend.
Okay, I'm good, Mr. Tomasic, and I noticed Mr. Silversmith has shown up on the attendees list. So if you wanted to begin committee of the whole early and let him speak now, we could do
Yes,
that.
let's do that, please.
All right, I'm going to authorize him to speak.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, thank you, everybody, for letting me chat with you about this. If you don't mind, I'll just take a couple minutes to give you what I think are 5 good reasons to hopefully give us a waiver, a very limited waiver, for the tonnage requirement on traveling on West Avenue between my property, the former Westinghouse Adam Smasher property, and Greensburg Pike. The first reason that I think it's that would support it is it's a very limited waiver that I'm asking for. This is for a truck driving school, a vocational school. It would be the only location that they would have in Pittsburgh, at least for now. They have over 60 locations nationwide. They do not have one in Pittsburgh. So they would make Forest Hills kind of the community, the focus for their vocational education in Pittsburgh. And it would only involve a few trucks a day during the week. It's not going to be much truck traffic. And because these are trucks for training people, they're going to be clean, empty, and they're not going to be full of debris or trash or anything else. And they're only going to, again, they're only going to use West Avenue between the Westinghouse site and Greensburg Parkway, where they're going to travel up to for training on Greensburg Parkway and then the highway. And actually, as you know, West Avenue is divided between Forest Hills and Chalfont. And Forest Hills controls the lane going up, and I think Chalfont controls the lane, I'm sorry, Forest Hill controls the lane going down the hill. Chalfont controls the lane going up. And the Chalfont Council President, Chad Hoover, and Mayor Perry are each in favor of allowing the truck usage on at least the Chalfont side. And Chalfont said that they're going to monitor West Street for any damage or separation, and they're going to demand that the area be kept clean of debris, which obviously would complement whatever Forest Hills would like to see done, but presumably you have a commonality of interest. In addition to this being a limited waiver request, the second reason to hopefully approve the waiver is this is not actually a new use for West Avenue. Westinghouse, in fact, built the road specifically for big trucks to have access to the Westinghouse site. Historically, large trucks did travel the same route, and the road was built for that purpose. I'm told that Westinghouse designed West Avenue to accommodate 20-ton trucks, and our trucks will all be much less than that. The third reason to hopefully approve the waiver is that as a large vocational school, it could possibly jumpstart an economic and educational revitalization of the borough, because this will be, hopefully, I think, a premier truck driving vocational school. And 160 Academy, since they're the world's largest truck driving school, they really know how to do it and do it right. Everybody who attends the school gets a commercial driver's license. So if you're in Pittsburgh and you want to get a commercial driver's license for trucks, you would come to Forest Hills and take this course. In addition to whatever economic activity occurs on our site, relating to it, if you approve our waiver, then they will lease between 1,500 and 1,800 square feet of classroom and office space. They do this on all their locations. And I think they didn't tell me where, but they've already signed a letter of intent, but it's contingent on your waiver approval for our site. And I think it's on Route 30 because they typically look for high traffic locations so their signage is visible. But my only point is that there's more economic activity that's created for the borough if you allow this. A fourth quick reason to approve the waiver is that with a paying tenant, which we haven't had for over a decade, we'll be able to finish, we'll be able to better afford to finish the cleanup of the site. In anticipation of this tenant, we already started taking out more debris. Last week, we had over a dozen truckloads take debris out. And we're also working with DEP. We're going to put a foot of clean fill on everywhere that's not paved. Well, most of it is paved, but on the back side of it toward the fence, it's not. And there, we're going to put a foot of clean fill. That's a DEP requirement. And once we do that, then we're going to get sign off to residential standards from DEP. And so even though our tenant at this point will be commercial, it'll be cleaned up to residential standards, which I think is just good for the community and good for the neighborhood. The final item I want to mention is hopefully a reason to prove or a factor is that we've agreed to donate land to the borough for irrigation purposes. The borough needs the land, they requested it. It's down the hill, but it's part of my land. And obviously if we have a paying tenant, we can better afford to donate land. If you may know, years ago, when we got the property, we donated the land under the Senior Citizen Center across the street. So in this case, we're going to donate more land. So in conclusion, I just want to indicate that it's been over a decade trying to find any type of tenant, and they're hard to find. And here we have, I think, a first-class company that'll bring in, that's a viable educational employer. So I hope that you'll give due consideration and work with us for this very limited waiver on only West Street for a few trucks that will not carry debris, going only from our site up to Greensboro Pike and back a couple times a day. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Mr. Corbel, do you want to address these issues at this time?
Yeah, in order to, well, a couple things. First, the property issue isn't the irrigation process. This, our proposal, this is the stormwater MS4 program that we're looking at behind the park and ride with the big stormwater facility that's there already. That's what we're talking about, just to make sure everybody understood that. As it relates to this, there really isn't a mechanism under the ordinance for council to specifically grant Mr. Silversmith or the potential tenant a waiver, but what we are able to do is to amend the ordinance to permit trucks on West Street. Right now, in our ordinance in section 15-301, we have a general prohibition of vehicles over 1,800 pounds or 18,000 pounds on borough streets. So we would need to include this as a exception to that, and or basically via ordinance allow this to occur. I think, from a legal perspective, that's the best that I can advise you on how to proceed. But to me, the question should be put to Mr. Gilliland is that can the road indeed handle that type of traffic, truck traffic? I know Mr. Silversmith is indicating that it was built to some certain specifications for the Westinghouse use. I think we would feel better if we had that confirmation from Mr. Gilliland or his firm that use would be permitted of the road.
And I will mention that Chalfant told me that they were talking to him, and they were having him study it to make sure that the road would meet the capacity. And I haven't been privy to those discussions, except I was told just tonight by Chad Hoover that I think it will be okay. They want the road to be monitored for any damage or separation in the future.
Marcus?
I'm a little bit concerned about it. Actually, I'm quite concerned about it. you said it's a premier truck driving school and one of the largest facilities in the country. And then you say there will be only a few trucks going back and forth. To me, if it's a truck driving school, they probably have the same few trucks going back and forth probably every hour because, I don't know, they pick up students or whatever. So, and if you look at the street, it's not a big street. It's like, it doesn't have the center lane marking. It's not really, it's made for two opposing traffic, but trucks going back and forth like on multiple times a day, I don't know. Just when you say premier truck driving facility and one of the largest in the country, and West Street, I have concerns about that.
Well, I should say, I don't want, because it's the largest truck driving school in the country, to imply that that means there's going to be a lot of traffic, because I've been told that they will store the trucks on my site. They will bring that up to Greensburg Pike for training and to the highway. They're not going to be going back and forth all day with a bunch of students. That they need to get up there and then they need to get back. But they indicated to me that there would not be much traffic. In fact, it would be just to get the trucks up West Avenue, which was built for the purpose of trucks.
Yeah,
but I don't think
the house was like quite 50 years or more, and probably the standards at that time were probably different than today. To me, if you look at Google Maps simply, and I went to West Street myself, to me it doesn't look like a good road for trucks, but it's just my opinion.
Okay. All right. Let me ask a question here, and I really don't want to get into a big discussion. We have some items that we have to look into concerning our engineer, and we need also, I think, to be contacting Chalfont and find out exactly what exists in terms of their ordinances, et cetera. But if these trailer trucks, and forgive me, I really don't know what these weights are in terms of these trucks, but if we have an unloaded trailer going down that street, is that exceed the 9-ton or 18,000 limit that we have already? And if it doesn't, he doesn't need any approvals or modifications in the ordinance. I don't know what that number is.
He said it does exceed it probably. He said some of the trucks that they will keep a couple trucks there that will exceed it, and they just need the ability to go up West Avenue. But unfortunately, they will, even though they're empty, they'll exceed it.
What that then means is we would have to modify our ordinance to do that. Okay, and there's a procedure that we should go through in terms of dealing with this. And that the first step, I think, would be to find out whether or not that road is capable of handling it. And then if so, then we would be talking about modification of the ordinance if council so agrees to do so. Mr. Morris?
Just so you know, online, I asked a question, what does an unloaded tractor trailer weigh? And it said 30,000 pounds if it's unloaded. So just so you know.
Thank you.
Well, Chalfont has been working with Glenn, with the engineering company, so that they can get comfortable. So I, of course, encourage you to have your engineer talk to them, which Chad Hoover told me that his engineer that he's hired was going to be talking to yours. So I'm not an engineer, but that would be great.
Oh, okay, so then should we be moving this, Mr. Porco?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have one question for Mr. Silversmith. So you mentioned you're in talks with Chalfont Borough, and I believe you're talking with their president of council. And
Yes.
you mentioned that you guys would be in monitoring that. So
Yes.
what happens if, I guess my question is, do you guys have any formal agreement about what happens if the payload is too much for West Street? What happens if those tractor trailers, and that's going to be the only entry and exit into that property? What happens when that road, let's just take for safety's sake the assumption that the road will not be able to withstand the payload. What happens then? Do you have any kind of formal agreement on how that gets remediated?
Well, my formal agreement with them is that is that they would have to stop doing it till we repair it. And the agreement between myself and the tenant would be that we would have to fix it if we're causing damage to the street. That we would, as the landlord and as the one using it, would have to fix it. Now, if other trucks start using it and they cause it, well, I guess the question is, is it being caused by my tenant? But if it's being caused by my tenant, we would assume that responsibility to pay for any repair. If it's, it is a public road, so obviously others could be using it, but we feel confident from what we've been told that the road would suffice, that it was, I guess, repaved more recently, but we're told that it was built to standards to support much heavier trucks. And because we don't think, we've been told that there's not going to be a high frequency of trucks going back and forth. So the usage really will not be very significant.
Well,
they just need the ability. There's no other way to use the site unless they can go up West Street.
May I ask council a question? Is anybody opposed to us looking into this aspect? Because we would have to go to, as Mr. Morris indicated, at least the 30,000 pound weight limit. From my own personal knowledge, I know that there is a light industrial shop over there, and I believe that I have seen trailer trucks parked in front of that in the past. It has been shut down for some time, but I don't want to be using that as a reason to be able to let these trucks go down unless we know for sure that the road is sound and that it can handle these 30,000 pounds going up and down. Is there anybody opposed to us investigating that with our engineer and talking to Chalfont and finding out what their position on this is?
That sounds like the right way to go. Yeah.
Okay, could we do that then? All right, then that's what we'll do. We'll work with Mr. Corbel, Mr. Gilliland, Mr. Morris, and let them move forward on this project to see if it's feasible. Does that sound all right to you, Mr. Silversmith?
Yes, thank you very much. I really
Okay,
appreciate it.
Patty?
I'd like to know what your plan is for the Atom Smasher that's on the site at this time.
We, at this point, there's, to be direct, what I'm looking at is moving it to the corner of the property, not lifting it up yet because CandyLab is told that's a pretty significant six-figure number. But if I spend about $10,000 of my money, I can move it to the corner of the property because I want to make the property viable and start using it. And but I want to preserve the Atom Smashers still. So candidly, what I'm looking at is just to move it to the corner. If you're looking at it, if you're facing it from the road, it would be moved to the right. There's a parcel I have that's a third of an acre in the corner, and I could move it over there. And that's just, frankly, just temporary. In other words, I don't want to destroy it. I've had demo people say, we won't charge you anything because the scrap will equal the cost of demolishing it. But I'm not willing to do that. I frankly value history and heritage, and I think it has meaning. So to answer your question, we're just going to keep it, but move it to the corner of the property. Yes, Steve.
Mr. Morris?
I just want to make sure you know, Gary, that somebody was up here last week claiming that they were hired to demolish the Atom Smasher. They wanted us to give them a permit. So I don't know who that guy was.
No,
I told him to contact
not,
our code officer, but just so you know.
Yeah, no, if somebody shows up, again, tell me, because we've had a lot of people coming by recently. I'm not getting a demolition permit, so that's not me and it won't happen. But we've had a number of people come by to my crew that's been there taking away debris and taking pictures. They've had drones come up 2 weeks ago and taking all sorts of, and they're frankly people, I don't know who they are. There's been a heightened interest more recently in the Atom Smasher, at least from people coming by. And
That's a moot point because the only person to get the permit is Mr. Silversmith.
yeah, I'm not
Okay,
getting that.
we've made a decision. We know where we're going. So let's move on with our meeting then. Thank you. Mr.
Bill, I have one further comment.
Yes.
I just wanted to clear up. Mr. Corbel, correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to make it clear to Gary, Mr. Silversmith, that we are only asking for an easement on his parcel. We're not asking for him to donate the land down there. We just need access to through his parcel to improve and install the sedimentation pond. And I don't believe Dave is on this call. And he can go into it in further detail, and I don't know all the details. But I do just want to clarify for Mr. Silversmith that it is just an easement. He is not donating that land.
No, although I can't use that part of the land where there's the easement. I mean, but frankly, all I'm saying is I'm willing to do it. I want to do it. I'm going to do it. But I guess I'm pointing out, look, I'm working with you and helping you and just donating it. So hopefully you'll work with me to try to make this work so I can finally get some economic value out of the property.
Completely understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that ends that discussion. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Okay.
Steve, go back to you on the manager's update.
That's fine. Gary, I'm going to mute you now since we're ending you.
Well, I'll leave you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay, first, some of this stuff is just information. The Duquesne Light LED program is starting up again, and I have a little clip from their letter that they sent us. We don't need to decide anything until June 30th to get an application in. If you wanted to, once again, pick 10 streetlights, contiguous streetlights, and convert them from the sodium, high pressure sodium or whatever they are to LED, we can do that again at cost. So I wanted you to think about that. I'll put this back on the agenda in March, so you have time to think. We've done things like Greensburg Pike. We've done Braddock Road between Greensburg Pike and Ardmore, and we did Ardmore Boulevard. I believe those are the 3 areas we've already done with this. So I just need you to think about it, and I'll have it on the agenda in March.
Yeah, I'd like to just note,
Patty, you can go first.
Yeah, I'd just like to note that it is part of our climate action plan to make these kinds of efficiency improvements in the borough on as expeditious a schedule as we can. So I think this is something we should go forward with,
Well, again, and you can tell me which streets or which 10 lights you want to do in March. Just take a look at it now.
If we did it, it's like I think our 3rd or 4th year, and the costs to remove those lights are not large. I think the return of investment will be very quickly because we save electricity by having those LED lights. So I think it's a no-brainer. We just have to decide where we want those. We do it every year.
Tom?
Thank you. No, I was gonna say, yeah, Steve, between, I guess, you, Dave, my dad, maybe, can you guys give us a list of places there's 10 consecutive lights in a row? Because I think the last time we did this, we actually ran into problems. We figured out Fillmore, then Braddock, and then it was like, well, where are there 10 lights in a row that we can technically get them to do it?
Yeah, I have a list from Duquesne Light.
Okay.
So I'll have that for next time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let me just make that as a note. Okay. No other questions about that? Okay, item B, if you have ever looked at our website, you've seen this at the bottom, this video tour of Forest Hills. It was done for us for free by CGI Communications because they sell, ads and things like that for local businesses. Well, they also have a program called a banner program, which I've shown you on the agenda that you have. And if you, for some reason, aren't seeing it, it looks like something like this, where they will put banners on your streets, your business district street lamps, similar to what we have down there now, that would have some informational stuff about the town, and then also an ad. And they do this at no cost to the borough. They want to know if we're interested in expanding our relationship with them to do that. And you don't necessarily have to make a decision now if you don't want to, but I know right now on the pole lights, on the poles, they have the Centennial banner on there. And at various times we've had other banners on there too. But they take care of doing everything as far as meeting with the sponsors. The only thing that we do is give them a letter saying that, yes, the borough is fine with them engaging people.
Marcus?
But sure, if I'm the only one, I think they're ugly and I'm against it. having that commercial logos of, I don't know, I don't like them.
It's fine with me. Just if does anybody else want me to drop it, I'll drop it.
Anybody in favor of moving forward with this?
I don't know about this, but I like the banners in general, but I'm kind of the same in the middle with Marcus. I like the banners. I don't know about the, these ones with advertising type logos on them, not just recognizing.
Frank?
I believe, we were just reviewing this, but I believe Steve Morris, that is, we do have some money available with some of the grant money that Jay helped us secure to kind of maybe do those banners another way without the corporate logos on it, but it may merit additional conversation. It's sort of tacky to put corporate logos on it. That's just my opinion.
All right, well, I don't see any positive direction here for that, so I would axe that from any future considerations.
Okay, I'll drop that idea. I'll tell them we're not interested. Item C, vaccine policy. Campbell Durant sent out a two-page note about vaccination policy and your employees, suggesting that we might want to set up some kind of a policy for COVID vaccine. And so I attached the little article that was written by Mike Palumbo and another attorney over there to your agenda for you to take a look at, for you to review and either discuss with Mr. Corwell at some time or have on in March to talk about. It's not something you have to do right now, but they are recommending some kind of policy. And you can read, I highlighted the information in green. You can read that for yourselves. And unless somebody does not want it on the agenda to discuss next month, I was going to put it on in March after you've had a chance to look at it. Mr. Corbell's had a chance to review it as well.
That's fine,
okay?
Steve.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Item D then, when we had the Public Works meeting last week, if you recall, Mr. Gilliland had not provided me with the list of streets he thought he had, and I showed it on screen. So I told you I would publish that on the committee of the whole for the recommended streets. This will go back on Public Works in March for your consideration again, but you did not see this list on your agenda last week. So I wanted to print it out for you so you can see it here, and I will put it on the Public Works agenda for March. And I don't know if you have any questions about that, but I'm assuming you don't. And you can talk about it with him there, but this way you have a copy, okay? The next item, Woodland Hills EMS had not provided me with their call log in time for public safety last week, but I have it now. It's attached to this agenda. Item F, last week, again for Public Works, Three Rivers Wet Weather had not sent me their monthly report update. They sent it now, and so I just wanted to show you that they are going to be doing another municipal rate survey of all the communities that have or in Alcoasand that have a sewer fee. There was somebody who you may have remembered. I don't know if this was on an agenda or if I'm just remembering somebody else dealing with this, but a resident who had said this was only a 5-year thing. And how come we still have a sewer fee? And of course, it's not a 5-year thing. It's more like a 500-year thing. It's never going to end, believe me. And I've said this many times. It's been published in the Tree City Times that way. I don't know what he was looking at, but and then he also said we're one of only a few communities that have a sewer fee. No, we're one of like 80 communities. I think there's 83 in Alcoasand that have a sewer fee. Everybody does that's in Alcoasand, and more people as the EPA gets involved in this are going to start having sewer fees too, whether they're in Alcoasand or not. So in any case, they're going to do another survey. Two more items. Item G.
Steve,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, before you continue, I think the big confusion there is we bill separately, whereas other surrounding communities still bill through Wilk Penn Water.
Right.
And I know that we bill separately to do in-house. Is that something we should look at farming back to Wilk Penn Water?
I would advise I would advise looking at it periodically. We did it last time because the last time we looked, they were so expensive. It was just as cheap to hire somebody, and we already had somebody on staff anyway doing other billing. So we also looked at the Turtle Creek COG, The only difference with, the only advantage to having it with Wilk Penn back then was that the bills were a little bit more immediate, but the cost of doing it was really high, so we decided not to. I forget, I don't have that in front of me, I forget, but it was.
No rush on it.
Yeah.
I mean, with everyone being backlogged now and people
Yeah.
in and out of the office and stuff like that, I just figured maybe it's a good time to look back into that
Well, yeah, go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
just for cost basis. If they tell us they could beat our price, or you think that it's cheaper and easier to farm out, then maybe we look back into that.
Well, I can't go into it, but believe me, the next few years, you're going to have staffing changes. So you're going to want to take a look at some things going on. And if anybody wants to know what I mean by that, that would require an exec session. So I'm not going to go into that. I don't have anything concrete, but I know you're going to end up having some staffing changes in the next few years. So, that's one might be a time when you might want to consider it again. And that would certainly be worth looking at.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
As part of that response, to that gentleman who had inquired about the pricing structure,
Yeah, that was you. That's right.
I would actually, so right now, I think the way we're doing is probably one of the more cost permissive ways in terms of how we compare it to just the eastern half of the Alakazam Basin. When you look at our rates as compared to others, I would say we're probably in the bottom 1/3 as compared to others with their rates and what they're charging. And I agree with Bill. I think what happens is that people don't realize or understand that bill is just coming through a third-party entity such as Wilk Penn Joint or Turtle Creek Valley Cog or whomever. But I thought our rates compared to others in the Eastern Basin were very competitive.
I will stop you there. But our rates are on the higher side, and rightfully so. I asked the question to myself numerous times. I don't understand how the other boroughs and municipalities around us can keep up with their updating like we do on our basis when they're not charging the premium that we're charging. And the premium we charge is for good reasons and good for good measures. But I will have to agree there. And Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we are on the higher side rather than the lower side. We're above 50%.
Yeah, we're a little bit higher, but you're right about the one thing that's because we're essentially caught up. I mean, I'm not saying we're perfect, but compared to some other communities that I talk to, other managers, they want to know how come, we're so far along and they aren't. So that is one reason, sure. Does anybody else have any other things about that? Okay, then two more items. Item G, you have a policy about this in which I reprinted there. Woodland Hills Drama has submitted an ad request for an annual ad in their Jesus Christ Superstar production that's going to be held at the Cary Furnace site. And I attached that information to this agenda if you want to read the 3 pages they sent us. But as you can see from our policy, it always is something that council considers, even though it's only a small amount of money that we typically pay. So if you're going to do that, we have done it some years and other years we haven't. If you're going to do that, it has to be an okay from you. And in the past, it's just been an okay by committee like this. It's not been an okay other than a mention at the meeting. It's not been an okay as a vote necessarily.
Well, then let's follow the policy and let's take an ad out. I believe that we've always done that since Mr. Karras has been here.
Yes.
So let's just do the
It's been almost
$100
every
ad.
year.
I think
Okay.
it's good to support them. I'm more than happy.
Okay. The last item I have, Action Housing has asked for some time next month. They have a proposal from a veterans group that does sculpture work, a veterans arts group that wants to create a sculpture for them and put it at the corner of Ardmore and Braddock at their facility there. And they wanted to give you some information on it because they wanted to make sure that the borough was fine with it and that, of course, there were no issues or restrictions regarding, putting it at the corner, any zoning issues, et cetera. So they asked me if it would be okay with you they'd like to have a few minutes at the committee of the whole meeting in March. Any problems with that? Okay, then that's all I have, and I'll put that on the agenda next month.
Okay, the next item we have solicitor's report. Let's hold off on that for a second, please, Mr. Corbo. I want to go to number 5, very briefly, contract provisions enforcement. When we enter into any type of agreements, those things that we approve by council can only be changed by council. Please, no one should try to make an alternative suggestion or change what the given specs are. So it's at least improper, if not illegal, for us to make changes to a contract after we've already approved it through a council process. If anybody has any suggestions about making changes to a contract or wanting to revisit it, it has to be done through the manager and approved by council. So in the future, please, if you have any ideas as to making changes or suggestions about whatever it may be, please run it through the manager and through council. Back to number 4.
I went to the, Alcosan has made their regionalization transfer agreements. They made some minor modifications to the municipal authority obligations. They're relatively technical in nature and rather minor. They gave us a fact sheet on it, which I was hoping had been included in your panel, but I think they're pretty fundamental. Mr. Corbel, did you review these?
It was sent out by email, just so you know. Everybody should have gotten a
Okay,
copy.
everybody should have got it. All right. So I think we need to agree to these at some point. I don't know where we are on our contract process for the transfer. I know we've been making the improvements, but these little amendments will have to go into that agreement that we're considering for the Alcosan transfer of the trunk lines.
You know, ultimately, council will have to consider that, and you'll have to decide if you wanted to do it. Alcosan is sort of unveiling this to the municipal officials at this point. And, you know, if there's any, you know, major negative feedback, there could be changes, but I expect them to stick with the draft that is with us in, you know, large part. I don't expect any material changes. And it's something that I think you all will have on you should have on your radar for some point this year, that this will be something you'll be asked to consider.
Right. These were just some minor adjustments to that proposed overall contract that they had done, and they're pretty minor. So.
And if anyone's missing it, let me know via email. I'll send it out again. I have all the attachments.
Yeah.
Those explanation documents are very, very helpful.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily read the contract, which is really opaque and full of legalese. The other documents do a pretty good job, I think, summarizing.
The 6-point table is the fact sheet. It's pretty clear, and I didn't have any issues with this. And I know we're going to have to act on this at the point where we're done with our upgrades, and I think that should happen later this year. I think.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yeah, just real quick, something occurred to me with this discussion, and it reminded me back when I was in the EAC. I don't think anybody is on council now, except for Mr. Brule. About 3 or 4 years ago, Dave Gillen and Mr. Tomasic started looking at this runoff issue, and there were some different proposals, and I don't know if you're familiar, but they finally went ahead and did a mitigation effort down below the Silversmith property, actually. And that took a lot of effort and a couple of years of pushing through. And I think, I remember some council members kind of dragged their feet on it. But that initiative worked out really well for us. And I believe Mr. Tomasic, that was we were reimbursed like $150,000 for that project. Is my memory right on that?
Well, it started about 4 years ago, and what happened was Dave came to council asking for proposals, and then I suggested that we put that whatever you want to refer to it as down there to meet the MS4 requirements. We got lucky in that proposal was passed by council, and we ended up applying for a grant. We're going back at least 4 years, I think. And that the grant was approved, and now the grant money's gone. So we were fortunate there to be able to save the taxpayers $150,000 in terms of putting that thing in.
Yeah.
I think that that worked out well for us because it also accommodated the entire MS4 project for the borough, which was another savings because we didn't have to go out. I think the original one was Watt Lane, and we didn't have to go out and find another one. So that took care
No,
of
we didn't
it.
have to split up the project, yeah.
So we got lucky.
But I just want to bring that up as a kind of institutional memory of something that worked out very, very well in this area, and we're going to have to be dealing with a lot of it moving forward.
Well, one of the things that are in this modification that I was really happy to see was that the obligation and indemnification obligations on the borough initially were into perpetuity, and now they end at 12 years. So there's a definite cutoff date for our obligation to have any, liability for the things that we're transferring over. And that's really important because then we can say there's a date certain where we have no further obligation to the system.
Okay. Okay, is there any other comments? Nope. All right, then let's go to Mr. Corbel, the solicitor's report, please.
I don't have a whole lot to report, actually. I thought that folks may have questions about one of the enforcement matters at the Roman Bistro. Is that something that you wanted me to address?
Yeah, I asked, as a matter of fact, I asked that be put from borough property onto the committee of the whole. And you're familiar with it from beginning to end because you have advised Dave in terms of going in front of the magistrate for what has occurred down there. So please give us the complete story from beginning to end.
So the issue originally came up earlier this fall, and it came to our attention, and there was excavation done behind the Roman Bistro. And that area is there's a portion of it that is owned by the gas station. There is a paper street, a paper alley, and then there's also Berkeley Road, or Berkeley Avenue, I'm sorry, which is a borough right-of-way. And so I had asked Dave Gilliland, in order to understand what's happening there and where things are going, as to conduct a survey of the property to determine where the excavation occurred. And we received a survey from Mr. Gilliland earlier last week, which indicated that the excavation occurred completely within the borough's right-of-way. Additionally, earlier this fall, I think we all recall that we were dealing with another grading ordinance issue, and that was with respect to Mr. Gorel's property, which has since been resolved. But that is where the fill from this site was deposited. And one of the ways where Dave Gilliland was estimating the fill that was on Mr. Gorel's property was to measure the area behind the Roman Bistro where the dumpsters are now. So Dave Naylor has issued letters and notices of violation to the Roman Bistro for violating the grading ordinance. They have not submitted any plans. This encroachment into the right-of-way has raised concerns with respect to the stability of the road. If everybody remembers, I don't know how many years ago it was, a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we spent in excess of $100,000 for a landslide on Berkeley Road. And Mr. Gilliland is analyzing whether or not this encroachment has created any instabilities, and it could require geotechnical investigation. So that matter with Mike Roman and the encroachment there is scheduled on a citation with the magistrate in the middle of March, so about 6 weeks away. I've had contact with Mr. Roman's attorney, and ask them to submit the appropriate documentation so the borough can review and determine whether or not a grading permit should be issued. So that's one of the three issues I think that arise out of this. The second issue that arises out of this is, what do we do with the encroachment? Essentially, Mr. Roman or his contractor has trespassed into borough property and removed multiple tens of cubic yards of fill from that site. Your options range from telling them to remove it and replace the fill to looking at an agreement that you could have. My suggestion would be with Action Housing as the landlord, as the property owner, and perhaps the tenant as well, which would permit them to encroach into the right of way. We've done that before. We do have a license agreement with Action Housing and the Roman Bistro right now to permit an encroachment for their outdoor seating that is along the sidewalk there. I think that's the way to go. I did have an opportunity to talk to the Action Housing, the landlord, and they indicated that they would be amenable to discussing that. But they also were disappointed with what has happened and the manner in which it occurred. And then lastly, so with those two issues, we have a lot on our plate to resolve. There's a lot of moving parts still in order to determine whether or not the encroachment has created any problems with the slope and the hillside that is holding up the road. There's costs involved. I mean, we've spent money to create a survey. There's potential geotechnical inspections that need to be completed. So there is costs involved here. The borough has not spent any money outside of the survey, and then money from my time or Dave's time. So there's that. And then with the encroachment agreement of sorts, we'll have to negotiate that with the landlord and try to resolve that, unless, of course, council directs us to, or me to, take a position where we want to have it removed. And then lastly, I do think that this transaction does potentially raise issues under the State Ethics Act for Mr. Gorel. And, I'm not in a position to, investigate that. But based on, just the facts that we have currently, there could be a conflict of interest that has been created with respect to the Roman Bistro. There's also the potential for improper influence of sorts. I mean, we've got situations where Mr. Gorel has asked for several things to be done by the Roman Bistro with respect to electronic signs and crosswalks and other things. And it, based on the information that I've learned through the grading issue on his property, the borough fill was placed there. We don't know if it was paid for, if it was a gift, etc. And I'm not suggesting to council that I review these matters. I'm just raising it as this is another issue that should be dealt with in some fashion moving forward. So that's it in a not quite a nutshell, but that's where things stand. I am able to continue to report to council as we meet as to what is transpiring with respect to the citation hearing in March, which my hope is that'll be resolved if Mr. Roman submits the necessary documents for a grading permit. And then also in discussions, if that's where council's wishes are, to discuss an encroachment agreement with the Action Housing Group in order to resolve that. So does anybody have any questions? I hope was that sufficient?
It sounds good from beginning to end. There's only one, I don't want to get into it. Let me put it this way. Some of these things that you're talking about in terms of discussions, do they have to be public or do they have to fall under the executive session?
Well, I mean, if we're going to be talking about terms of agreements, if we're going to be talking about a litigation strategy for enforcing our citations, et cetera, those things, those details should be discussed in executive session.
Okay. All right. We have somebody on the screen. Mr. Morris was asking something. No? Okay.
I had a quick question. Is there a landslide hazard precipitated by this excavation? Do we know that?
We do not know for sure. Dave Gilliland's initial take was, you know, maybe not, probably not, but it probably warrants investigation to determine for sure if it hasn't changed something there that would make a landslide. It's already a landslide prone area based on past experience. So obviously any kind of agreement that we put together would place responsibility for any landslide on the user or the landlord. And that could be a hang up in the negotiation process.
Okay. Let's just, Marcus,
I have an unrelated question. Are we planning to have an executive session today to talk about some other legal matters we have ongoing?
no, we don't have any others going on at this time.
So there are no updates on,
No updates at this time.
okay.
Okay. Going back to this issue, I guess, should we schedule an executive session to discuss this at the next meeting? Which would be on February, what is it, the 19th?
No, it's the 24th.
24th.
Will Mr. Gilliland have time to look at the issue by that time?
I don't know, but I
don't think that we'll be able to have a full-blown geotechnical investigation if that's warranted at that time. I think that's probably something to discuss. If Mr. Gilliland is suggesting it, then my view is that we should ask the applicant who did the work to perform the geotechnical review and bear the cost. So, you know, as long as council's okay with this general outline that I put together, I will reach out to Mr. Roman's attorney and to Action Housing and just get the ball rolling. So to your point, President Tomasic, I think we could have an executive session pre-scheduled for the 24th, and then I could at least be in a position to provide council with an update at a minimum as to what's been happening and what legal issues have arisen.
Well, let's do that, but I would just like to state that concerning that road, we just put $140,000 into that area within 150 feet or so of where this guy went into that property. And it's amazing to me, the one thing for sure that he knew was the property didn't belong to him. He had to know that, yet he still went in there and dug into that hillside. And it's odd because, you know, he's had that business down there and all that. I mean, he had to see when the hillside fell in, and yet he didn't seek to get permission to do a study on that before he decided to do it, to get a permit. But in my opinion, that has to be done to make sure that that hillside is secure and is not going to slide in the future. There's no doubt in my mind that as council members, we have to do that at least. And we can talk about that in public, as we're doing right now. Other than that, I think we'll end this thing and we'll just move to.
I have a question. Mr. Corbo, have you addressed Dave Gilliland and Jim Thielacker as they were there and witnessed the digging out of the dirt? And they were the ones who said that as long as it's built like Dunkin' Donuts, as I was there and can testify to it, they were the ones who said that it was perfectly fine to do it exactly how Dunkin' was done. So, Mr. Corbo, have you discussed that with your engineer and your public works foreman?
Yes, they have a different recollection.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's not get in.
At the end of the day, a permit was required and it wasn't completed or submitted. whether somebody stood there and told you you could do it or not, you can't rely on that. So
They didn't tell me to, they didn't tell me to do anything. They didn't say that it was their dirt either.
I'm talking about the general you, Mr. Boyle. Like,
Right.
you know, somebody says something to you, it doesn't waive the requirement for a permit or a grading perspective. So
I wasn't the one applying for the permit or anything like that. No one said that. I just asked you if you talked to both of those people as they gave approval and said that it needed to be done like that, if it was going to be done.
they have no authority to provide approval to do that. That's a process that's set forth in our ordinance, and that Mr. Roman has thumbed his nose at it. So
And please, let's not repeat hearsay. All right? All right, I think that we had enough of this. Mr. Corbel, is your report concluded now?
it is.
Okay, so that will end this committee with the knowledge that we will possibly have an executive session on the 24th.